Now, do you often think that we're so strange as species in a way that we often believe that the calendar sets the tone for the universe? Like time and calendar set the standard point, and that's superiority, isn't it? So if you want to imagine it in another way, the seasons. Do you think that the seasons are going to be like, oh fucking hell, we're not going to lapse at all. We better follow the the human's calendar.
Yeah, people believe that seasons are just like.
No, they're not. The seasons can lapse, and as a result, if the calendar doesn't shift, then bit by bit you're going to have the wrong time of the year. So it then makes time is not really it's just made to get you in a workplace at a time and a place, and other than that you don't really need to operate around time, because productivity is when you feel well rested. You know, if you just turned up to a job at any old time and anyone could, man, they'd be getting bystanders that walk by. Oh, you got a few hours? I'll pay you, but you got a few hours? Oh, sure, alright then. And then the other person turns up when they're rested and everything else. Because we try and cram life into this schedule. But life doesn't happen inside schedules. It happens external of schedules, of scheduling. It's a very weird thing. And then they'll be like, but yes, we must get this done at this time, and it must be in the day, never at night, and not like this and not like that. And anyway, it's the same with the year. So right now, it feels like October, November. It really feels like that. Now, what's a feeling? Well, it seems like it is based on the season. You know, you would probably say that that's more October. November, end of October, starting of November. And then I noticed that the summer's getting later and later, and August some years is feeling a bit more like July, perhaps starting of July, and it's like, is it? And then October now is feeling more like late August. It just feels a little bit lapsed. And can it lapse? And then based on the calendar, you know, that it's set in stone, that it's going to be correct all the time. And I think that that's a belief. All of these things are beliefs, which I think is a bit weird. Damn, as humans, you would try and cram seasons into calendars, and that they, whoa, wait, why does it feel warmer? Why does it feel a bit more colder this particular month? I've never known it to be so cold. April showers has shifted. We still get the April showers, but just not in April. That's very weird. It's very weird. We often try and cram everything into this construct that we've made, and heaven forbid it ever move out of that. And time, life is crammed into this clock. Again, it's very strange. I find that quite a strange concept. Good on one hand, and also a weird on the other. So yeah, it's a bit like putting lots of salt on the road, and if it gets into the rivers, do you ever think that that'll have an impact? Depending on where the river starts, how many towns over it's gone, how many drains have leached into the rivers, then will verse how much fish and wildlife, and yeah, every time, and I understand that because it follows the course. And then by the time the river gets to the estuary, how much pH in salt is that? As opposed to if you didn't do it. I mean, that's a hell of an experiment, really, isn't it? For one particular year not to do it, and then one particular year to do it. And then what's the difference in the pH? Secondly is, what impact does that have on life that's inside the rivers? Is it a big impact? I think it is, because I don't think that they're supposed to be subject to salt, hence the reason why it's meant to be fresh water. But yet, if you go and put a drain in the road, and again, who creates these drains in the road? Who are they a part of? And then where's the environmental health type? And then what impact does this have at the river banks as well? Because this is going to have a knock-on effect. And the more higher up the river you go, and then is this going to stop things like salmon from coming upstream? Is this going to stop eels from coming upstream? Because it's just getting saltier. And then does this confuse them a little bit? Or a lot? You know, that's another... Everything hangs in a balance, and if we do things, yes, great, because it stops people from slipping over, but on the other hand, it's quite dangerous in a way. Hey, it doesn't mean don't do it, it means find a process that works, that connects the water, which you can then sweat out the water, collect the condensation and push that into there, if you can remove the salts from it. But once that's in the river, that's got to travel a long way. And then it's going to coat absolutely everything, and then I just wonder how much salt is too much for, let's say, river life. How much salt is too much for the river reeds and weed, the fauna and flora? How much does this create then? Are we relying on a breakdown process to break down the leaves to stop it from creating a lot of... oh man, it really stinks, doesn't it, when you walk through some of that where it's leafy. And then does this stunt the growth to fish? And if it does, well, what else is that doing? And again, have they never made a tyre or a wheel that can be part salt? And does this have any sort of benefit or to grip, or making a new type of tyre that sort of... Hell, if you had Velcro roads and Velcro wheels, it would be a weird thing for one, but still, you know, it's just me being a little strange with that, but still, yeah, it's kind of weird. So I often look at the life in the river and I think, and if you get to an estuary at the end of all of this and you had a sensor in there, how much salt? Because the salt must be, it's almost like, you think of it as a dinner plate. This is how I look at it. And I think at the start of the river, they put some salt on the roads, and this gets into the river. You might as well grind a little bit of salt on your river, and then it goes through, and then it's like salting a soup, really. And then once again, and then a little bit more. Further down to the river you go until you get to the estuary. Now let's try that soup. Oh my god, that is salty. It's over salty. And then, yeah, is it going to live? And then does this hit bacteria that's in the river to the point where it's almost obsolete? And this might stop the breakdown of certain leaves that fall in at this particular time of year. And anyway, even still with all of that, right? When the salt is gone, does this cause the bacteria to panic? So that it then starts overproducing, because it's, you know, it's like giving an antibiotic, but you just take one for an infection. Now, is that beneficial or dangerous? If you don't take the course of antibiotics correctly, can that be detrimental? Can that cause the bacteria to sort of dwindle down? Then, because you took it intermittently, then can it cause the bacteria to explode in growth?
Yeah, it will learn
And then it will become quite resistant to it.
it will share it, and next time it doesn't even get big right away, but after it shares with other types and even the same.
So in a river, well, it's God knows what else is being put in there, because there is bacteria going to the rivers. Because if you think about it, anyone that spits near a road or anything else, you can just imagine it. All the dog shit, dog piss, is sort of washes into the, and then this goes into the river as well. And then what does that look like with that much bacteria building up? Yeah. And then I sort of sit there and look at that and think, are we creating a problem here? And then what does that problem look like later on? What does that do when it gets to the ocean like that? Anything at all? Maybe not. Is it over salting? Well, no, we removed it from the ocean. Where did you get this salt from? Well, we chemically made it. Is it a chemically made salt, or is it a natural salt?
It doesn't matter because it's in
Yeah, but chemical salt, does it matter? You say that it doesn't matter, but if you're making a salt from chemical based, then surely you are building up the salts in the ocean.
Yeah.
So if it would be a little bit more, it'd still have detrimental effects, but if you were sweating salt water until you got the crystals and you were taking it from a salt flaps, let's say, I don't know, flats, and then you would put in that there, that is still adding salt to the sea. But if you were taking it from the sea directly and drying it out, which is distilling the water, and this is another thing with this solar chasers, that these would build up with salt crystals, which you could then take and then maybe put it on the road. You're still putting back the salt into the ocean, so you're not over salting the ocean, which is interesting, a very interesting process, but still, it's still detrimental because the fresh water can't deal with the salt. And plus that water, you know what happens if we drink too much water? It can kill us. Yet we're making water go straight into a river, when really shouldn't it be leaching through the forests and everything else, where that is going to be benefiting the lands, so the lands don't dry out too much. You got to think about it, all the fields that get rhizomania are next to highly salted roads. And when the cars run through it and it's causing that spray, that's covering the embankments and everything else, which is then parching the soil even more. And then each summer, because the water is making it quickly to the river as opposed to leaching through the land, it takes time to leach through the land. And then what you've got is you're not knocking out high levels of nutrition, which the leaves have put down and everything else, so that's not really washing. The land is drying out. And then the life in the river might be, and the sea might be relying on this leaching process. Because when you bump water through soil, it knocks things out and it grabs minerals content and it knocks out, and that process could be missing in all the rivers, which then could be missing in the sea. And if it is missing in the sea, does this affect the barrier reef? Does this have a knock-on effect for ocean life? And then are we depleting an ingredient that used to be abundant in the ocean? And then are we changing that? So usually we used to have high content of vitamin C. Well, high content of vitamin C comes from pine trees or evergreen. They produce an awful amount of vitamin C. Well, if you calculate this across the lands, bit by bit, this begins to, so basically you overdose the river in it and it will begin to evaporate this vitamin C. Okay, in concentrated levels, it's in high concentrate in the tree, but still when it's washing through it, it's leaving a percentage. And is that percentage then being evaporated in the water process or the rain process, let's say, and it's evaporating from the ocean water, perhaps the skin, and there's a little bit of vitamin C that's in that, and perhaps we were getting vitamin C from the environment, but now with the lack of these trees, there's less vitamin C, less minerals, and now we're just taking the water and just quickly chucking it into the river, and it hasn't gone through its processing, which it's natural processing, and then is all life that falls on that chain, the water process chain. It's not just food chains, it's water process chain, and then it's the evaporation process, which is again another chain, but then allows it to rain down. And does this move nutrients in the biome? And are we seeing less nutrients? And did this nutrients have a knock-on effect to keep down bacteria? Is it a missing link to the process? And now we're dependent on vitamin C, and then whoosh, are we losing something in this process? And if we are, is this causing an explosion in... You know, it's good to learn this before you go to space as opposed to find out halfway when you're traveling somewhere. Well, that's my personal opinion. And everything hangs on a balance. and knock out these balances. Sure, doesn't mean that it's gone imbalanced, because it will create a new balance, but whether that new balance supports life or not, meh, that's a different question entirely. So that's an interesting thing, very interesting. Yeah, so I often wonder about that with salting. Too much salt, what does it do? And if no one's looking, no, it doesn't do anything. But how do you know? Have you tested it? No. And how do you know it doesn't do anything? How do you know it does? Because it's logic based. That's a pattern. And then we see all river life dwindling. We see the more and more rivers are becoming quite yuck. They're eroding so fast in certain areas that the water begins pooling and stagnating. Again, that comes from constantly shoving water into the rivers. It shouldn't go into it. It should go into a place where it can be leached across the land. A better way would be to leach it out. And then you've got parched soil will hold on to that moisture. Fields will hold on to that moisture. Sure, it's going to sweat it out, but more so it's going to find its way down. Roots also find their way down. And then does this stop droughts? But you can't go chucking it over fields if you're putting tons of salt on the roads, and each time a car goes past, and it doesn't all just go in the drains. Most of this is pouring into ditches. The ditches are what? Moats around fields that allow them to hold on to moisture. To keep the field damp, isn't it? I think it works in two ways. See, there was this massive pit, and it looked bottomless for most of the time. Technically, it kind of is. It's just that it's got a lot of, I should say it's more of a chamber, a tube that runs to another pit. They're sort of joined, but it's not like it's empty because it's not eroding. It just seeps through this area easier to another. And when it was emptied out, I mean, there was a really hot summer and it was completely empty to the point where you could walk down there. But the fact is, when you started digging, well, you found the moisture. So even though there was enough to dry out that pit, when you dug down, the surrounding soil, I mean the vegetation that exploded in that area was more than any other area. And I think it comes from, like, if you've had a ditch around a field, although the water may not be there, if you dig down a little bit, it's very damp soil, and it's very good soil. So, you know, but if you've got a road that's being salted beside it and it's splashing into the ditch, or it's making its way into the ditch, are you then salting the ditch and you're changing the pH level on the fields?
In the towns, like walks
I think you can make crop circles with salt. Don't you think? Tip a load of salt circles in strange patterns. A bit like Art Attack, really, isn't it? When they were doing the thing with the sand. They're down on the ground doing it, can't see shite, but above there's a camera pointing down and it starts to show you a picture. Well, if you imagine that was salt, and again, first rainfall, it's gonna change the area in there, it's gonna stop things from growing, and it's gonna leave a nice pattern, isn't it? So I think crop circles are made by salt. If you push it all down, it could probably break it, but it doesn't explain it in the growth. Or unless you pull it all out, but there again, that leaves evidence behind. The only one that doesn't is salt. And because of the placement. So yeah, that's how bad it really does. So I think crop circles may be related to salt. Something of this nature. Even salt water, I mean, you can get this to... I'm pretty sure. But anyway, we're going to leave this one here because that's not what I want to talk about. But still, yeah, just the whole thing with calendars, time, and everything that we do, where we think it's convenience, are we knocking into cycles? And if no one's looking, we don't know, do we? And then if you don't know, then it's going to stump you as to what all these problems are. Why do we have all of this strange shit? And then if you are putting it into the... and every single part of the world is doing the same process, then you are creating a slick layer over the ocean. Sunlight hits it, and this is going to cause you widespread rainfall everywhere. This is going to start, because it's got more to pick up, so it's going to create a hell of a weather system or rainfall. I think it's coming from that, because it's stopped going into the land, hasn't it? We've concentrated the roads, and then we've put loads of drains there, and then that water in those drains, which technically you've made a surface for a river. If you think about it, the roads are no different to a river, really, aren't they? When you think about it, there's a flat surface for it to rain onto, and it can't seep anywhere, so it begins pooling in areas. So if you put a drain in and then connect all of these drains, and perhaps connect to a river or a ditch, or... interesting. And that's going to begin to have a knock-on effect. More of it gets into the river, it bulks up, and then this is going to cause erosion at coastlines. Because what would have taken perhaps a few months for that to seep through the soil and make it to the river on a slow process, it's going to bump out the stuff that's not needed, it's going to pick up mineral content along the way, and it's going to take a longer time to reach it to the rivers. It's going to keep the fields damp, which is good for plants. And then does that then balance the climate? Doesn't fresh water sit on top of salt water? Becomes a skim.
It should, because it's native, it doesn't have salt should pour.
And then you've got the large amount of water just before summer kicks in, and this is all flowing out onto the ocean. And if the ocean is not, the waves help mix it. So each wave, although there's a lot of them, you've got to be able to move that water to the coastline in order to be able to mix the fresh water with the salt water. And then fresh water is more easily to evaporate than salt water. Then that's going to have a knock-on effect elsewhere. That's crazy, man. And then it's going to start to evaporate large amounts. So you get a hot summer, and it's usually baking across the ocean anyway. That water is evaporating very quickly. And like all processes, I suppose, when it hits the land, that's when it drops the... And then why are we seeing more rainfall than we've ever seen? Well, let's go back and find out when we started putting drains on roads. Was it since the invention of the road, and then since putting in drains and then draining it into the rivers really fast? And then are we causing such erosion by doing that there's a massive amount of pressure in the river now, and it's moving very fast? This is causing problems for... have you not noticed it? Every time they start seeing the rivers get swollen, that's a result of that. Dumping it in the... there we are, we done it. We made it go to the river. It just got there quicker.
Because the river collects every point where it's going.
And then if the weather system is moving from town to town, but all of the town to towns are connected to the same river, dumping all of that water, you can see how very quickly this starts to bulk up.
It was already overflowing before the time.
And then the more this process continues, the more it's going to get more and more devastating. Then that's going to have another knock-on effect, because then it means that the sea, from where it hits the estuary and it gets across there, and it's going to be hitting across the skim. And that means if we get a hot break, really hot summer, and that's going to absorb that pretty quickly, because there are no trees to block that. And rather than the land holding on to the moisture, and where there's nature growing across the top of it, it kind of prevents it. Have you not noticed that? Where there's an open field, it's all dry, but where there's vegetation, You notice how damp the soil is? Yeah. And then this causes more erosion. Then is this creating rising sea levels, which then means there's more powerful waves, more erosion. And then you've got to add up the concrete, so the roads, then you've got to add up all of the houses. Again, it's not going down in the area, it's going into a gutter pipe. The gutter pipe is then hitting out into the road, and then that road is leading it to the river. No staggering intervals at all with it, at all. And I think this is partly Anglian water here a little bit, and I think it's partly environmental health. I just don't think they know what they're doing, if I'm honest. I think that they just favour money, and then lots of people have to suffer this because they want to believe they know what they're doing, but they're actually creating the problem. I don't want to do anything about it, I just want to charge you for it. And then how much erosion at coastlines is this creating? Then how much flooding? So now the rain is now torrential in places, which is then causing more flooding. Wow. And then each house, if you calculate how big each house is, then that water is still got nowhere to go. So a soakaway would actually be better. But they don't want to put soakaways in because they can't charge you money for it. Not storing this water. Part of it needs to be stored, and then you stagger it. And then if it gets into the land, well, if you think about it, if you could hold on to this water during the winter, and farmers use it in the summer when they need to wet the crops. Well, we haven't had any rainfall for a while. Yeah, because it's busy being, we've spent the whole winter shoving it into the ocean. Yeah. And then with this erosion, it causes the rivers to not be too great. And then, because it's gone into the ocean so fast, rivers are more prone to droughts, to drying out. I mean, to be able to go to Thetford and see the river empty, completely empty. You don't think that killed any fish, do you? I mean, I've never seen that. And then one particular year, it was completely covering all the way over it burst its banks. Never seen that. But the one thing I have seen is a population that's growing. Every drain goes into the river. Houses, more and more houses are being built. That water is then fast-tracked to... And then when it comes summer, because we've spent the whole time shoving it out into the sea, there's nothing trickling through anymore. And we've disturbed one of the biggest balances, I think. And then we complain about it, like, oh, look at this problem. I mean, and then insurance companies won't pay out for it because it's like classed as an act of God. Ha! That's an act of humans. That's no act of God. God didn't do it this way. It was perfectly balanced before. No, this is an act of greed. So yeah, no, I think that, you know, I think that should be owned by different pots. We inherit it like it. Yeah, we could sit here blaming who inherited what Fact is, if you sit here having this argument, it's never going to get fixed. Then you can hide it as much as you want, but it's starting to hampering on food. Do you see how you can have such a knock-on effect to this? Just one balance and it seems to be disturbing all of the balances. And then farmers are taking water from pits. That's why that pit got empty, because they were sucking it out to spray it over the field because it was so dry. And yeah, they were throwing it. That's even more. So yes, in a way, I suppose when it rains, that one fills that up. But now you've got land that's too parched. So now that it can't take on that water, and then it floods and then ruins your crops, and then not enough water, it's drought, so it's ruining your crops. Then there's over salting, so now we're mixing salt water into the river water, and then we've just converted all of that water that we've fast tracked into the rivers with loads of salt. And salt is more harder to evaporate than fresh water. So we'll have seasons of drought, wet, too dry. And I think if this carries on this trend, it's going to bugger up a lot of stuff. How well are your space farms coming? Because you're going to need it. Yeah.
All the drains, everything is straight, if possible, and as quick as possible.
And then mixing that salt with the water, and then I think eventually we'll have way too much salt. We'll convert all of the fresh water into salt water. Then I think it will stop raining completely. Then we'll be in trouble. Don't worry, you got the sun chasers though, the solar chasers. They'll get you out of that shit. Don't worry. And then what do these chemicals do when it gets to places like Hawaii, where the volcanoes are leaking out? Because that chemical, any chemical that gets into the river, out of the estuary, is sort of moving with the currents in multiple directions.
Salt is corrosive.
It's corrosive, yeah. Yeah, it's very corrosive. And then the more and more salt we're adding, because we're not taking it from the sea, are we? Does this have an impact on the polar caps? If the sea is getting more and more saltier,
Then it
doesn't it melt the ice? Doesn't salt melt ice? Frozen seawater. I think it's frozen fresh water though, isn't it?
Yeah, about 4 degrees or something like that.
So then you're going to require it to be even more colder at the caps in order to freeze it. Wow, what a balance. Core, what a pattern. What a pattern.
Because it's up to there are many, not just gulfs, there are many streets around the whole planet, which they never told us about. And they need the water, and some people are standing higher in the ocean. If some of it is deposited right now.
And then this is putting pressure on tectonic plates. Never mind that. Once that happens, you begin to increase volcanoes and you begin to weaken crusts in areas. It's happened lots on the planet, by the way, where land masses have sunk and other ones have pushed up.
Sahara was under the water,
This is a violent event, by the way. Near enough everywhere and nowhere is unscathed from it. When it happens, it's in months. Because when one plate is disrupted in this way, and it depends on where it is, this causes water to move. Then it presses on another, and another, and another. It creates a ripple. And then this begins to create the plates to have uneven pressure, and if it gets into your core, if the salt water makes its way into the core will respond in a way by trying to move away from it. If it doesn't crystallize quick enough, and then depending on how brittle that is and how much has got in, this can cause the core to pop out of the planet. All life is dead within less than a year. Shit, I think it could even be 6 months. Electronical equipment, that's fucked. Then you've got energy, that's all gone. Well, probably still operating, but we're very deep under the ocean. Then when that happens, usually because there's been a lot of life, there's a build-up of methane, ethane, and there's something else as well. This gets released very quickly. It's basically what happens is it comes in a series of 3 events happen simultaneously almost. Just when you think that you're getting to grips on the other one, and it's fast. The water moves incredibly fast to the point where it's drowned all your planes. No planes, it's quicker than a plane taxiing down a runway, getting faster and faster and ready to take off. If it isn't already in the air when that happens, it won't make it. It moves so fucking quick. Tidal waves are incredibly slow, by the way. They're slow, that's slow. Yeah, it's not about that. It destabilizes your gases, your current gases in the atmosphere. This triggers other events off. Oh, that's a rewrite, that is. That almost wipes all life from the planet. A small percentage clings on. Very small, and it's hit and miss. That's the end of all life forms. I think you'll be like an Edwardian time again. And even then, that was a challenge and a half, and that was from a gamma ray burst, they say so, but, you know. So yeah, small balances have a very, very big impact. It's crazy, isn't it? Just by doing something as fucking around with water. That's fucking strange, that is. You see, you've got to be able to understand a lot of events that you do, and then you've got to be able to predict the patterns that are going to ripple off of that. Do you ever wondered why the ancients used to talk about balance and why it was so important that it even spurred off a lot of religion? You see, they may not have been able to write things down the same way that you understand it, but tall tales pass down. It's almost encoded into you to pass these tales down, 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 as a warning. You're very lucky to have land here. Earth is technically a water world. Well, technically an ice world if it was further out. It would expand more so. But landmass? That's rare. That's from a bunch of fluky events that happen that allow the volcanoes to build you a platform up. Nature is highly reliant on that. That's why nature builds you up. Yeah, that's incredible. That is. It can even divert flows of rivers. Constantly dropping leaves in. This begins to build up, build up, build up, build up, and then the river changes course. It's crazy, isn't it? This is some real random shite, but it happens. It drops lots of twigs in, and if these get embedded into it, depending on how they fall, any debris that then come, rocks or boulders that come down the stream, they begin to build up in this area. And then the river, rather than working against that force, against that type of a force, it's too difficult, so it's easier to erode softer material, and it's usually one way or the other. and then it changes the course of the river. So yeah, that's when you understand that nature can build up, it's constantly lifting. It's just that it's because we see things so slowly, we see it like season after season. But that a little amount of time there, if you could speed that up over ions and ions, you would begin to see it. Great for lifting landmass, and pine, not so good. So you always got to find out, why did trees evolve? What was the point in their evolving? Why did they need to evolve? Rising landmass. Got to keep lifting the landmass. The only place that doesn't really happen is cactus. Yeah, it's interesting, very interesting. But yeah, so a lot of events there, stack up from one on the other, from the other, on the other, on the other, on the other. Wow, catastrophe when you knock the balances. And then they were very much understanding the balance, the balance, the balance. We can't overeat the animals. We can't overpick and forage. We can't overdo. We'll disrupt the balance. We'll disrupt the balance. It was very important for them to hold that in their minds. And they did a very good job. Nowadays it's like, balance? What fucking balance? Who gives a shit about balances? I want to tip them scales. Well, it's... Then if you were to see it, experience it, a few of you were to survive it, this would be passed down again. It'd all be about the balance. Well, anyway, we're going to leave this one here. So I've prattled on about this one a little bit long, but and I want to move on to another one, but still. It is about balance.